Hello there, friends, and welcome to a very special video interview series that we have today. I'm Geology Professor Shawn Willsey, and we have the distinct pleasure of being joined today by Robyn Henderek, who is the Physical Science Program Manager at Zion National Park. She works for the National Park Service, and we're really excited to have her with us today. We're going to learn a little bit about her background, how she got started in geology and science in general, what some of the roles she's had, her educational background, and then what she does for the Parks Service at Zion National Park, and learn a little bit more about that park from her perspective. So let me go ahead and bring her in. And there we go. Say hi, Robyn.
Howdy, everybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, Robyn, for this interview. It's been exciting to get ready for this. And you were recommended by Greg Stock, who's the Yosemite National Park geologist. So I've been real excited to learn more about Zion. Zion's a place that I've been visiting for a long time now. And I think it's, a lot of people who travel Western National Parks, it's always one that's ranked up there. So maybe just start with some basics on like your background, where you're from, where you grew up, how you got interested in science.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. Yeah, my name is Robyn Henderek. I'm, as Shawn mentioned, the parks physical scientist. And I grew up in New Jersey, actually, and fell in love with geology in the East. Which, as most Eastern geologists know, is really kind of driving from road cut to see, what piece of the puzzle you can to piece it all together. And my first time out west was actually in a structural geology class. We went out to the Bighorn Basin in Wyoming, and we did a mapping project around the doubly plunging Sheep Mountain anticline.
Yeah, classic.
And right, so classic. And it was just textbook geology, just right in front of you. And as an Eastern geologist, I couldn't believe that not to say it's easy out west, it certainly isn't, but I just couldn't believe that, you could really see what was going on beneath your feet right in front of you. And so I fell in love with the West on that trip. It was also the first time I ever saw jagged peaked mountains that were snow capped, and another sort of textbook formation that you only see in National Geographic as a girl growing up in New Jersey. But that was my introduction to the West, and I really haven't looked back since moving here. So anyway, growing up in New Jersey, my dad was actually the first naturalist hired by the State Park Service in New Jersey, and he ran a small nature center in this state park that we lived alongside. And I kind of grew up like catching frogs in the streams that surrounded the nature center, and just spent a lot of time there. He had to work on weekends because he was, primarily a public facing ranger. And so I would give tours as a young, first grader, showing guests to the nature center, all of our turtles and snakes and such. I actually have a photo I want to show you guys. I grew up in a family of 4 kids, and not everybody shares my love of of nature as I do. I don't know if you can see this photo.
Yeah.
This is my dad. Yep. So this is Ranger Wayne. This is me. And my dad, for a while, was kind of the default wildlife rehabilitator for the area before our county wildlife rehabilitation center had been built.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, in this moment, we had been just delivered a baby raccoon that we needed to raise and then release into the wild. And this is my brother, who you can see is not so excited about.
He's not as excited about being in the photo, but you look invested. You look like you're in it for the long haul.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I witnessed my dad, teaching people about how to kind of live in this natural world, not to be separated from it, but how to kind of gain a connection with nature. And that was just so compelling for me. Not so much my brother. My brother now works for a big bank, making lots of money.
Different direction for him, right?
Yep.
So you knew at an early age, like you knew even like back in this photo, like you were going to do something involving nature or science or the outdoors. Like you, is that true?
You got it. You
Yeah.
got it. Yep. I was totally, I drank in the Kool-Aid.
Awesome.
And yeah, goodness, but I didn't quite find geology until here, I'll stop sharing now. I didn't quite find geology until college. So one of the other things that my dad really had a fascination for was kind of primitive technologies. He had a lot of experimental archaeologist friends that would come to the nature center and teach you how to make burnt out bowls and how to, make arrowheads out of chert and just how to kind of utilize these age old techniques to live in this world. And I just became fascinated with archaeology. And really the concept of time was fascinating for me, like studying early humans, thousands of years to millions of years old. And it wasn't until college that I just happened to take a upper level paleobiology class, not as a geology major, but only because I needed to fill a space in my schedule. And I realized that the Earth is so much older than the small bit of time us humans have been
Right. Yeah.
on its planet. And so I just became fascinated with this concept of deep time. And I luckily had some very supportive professors that allowed me to continue to take this class that I was wildly unqualified for.
Which school were
And
you at this point? Like, where were you? Are you in New Jersey still at this point, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. So, Lafayette College in
Okay.
Easton, Pennsylvania, it's a small liberal arts school. And they really kind of have like a focus on undergraduates because they are a college. And I really got to have some like, intense relationships with my fellow students and then also my professors. And
Right.
I took this paleobiology class and I fell in love with the concept of geology and deep time and I didn't even fathom that things could be older than humans.
Right. Right. So kind of like open Pandora's box for you in terms of like this other interest that was separate but still related. I mean, it still was the natural world, which I think is what you were fascinated by, even when you were working with your dad and stuff. So,
Yep, you got it.
yeah.
Yeah, I just found this niche that really kind of hooked me. And we throughout my time at Lafayette, we did a lot of field trips because, as my professors would say, the best geologists are the ones that look at the most amount of
Yeah,
rocks. And
exactly.
so, yep, we drove up and down pretty much the eastern seaboard and we looked at as many rocks as we could. And I remember like the first fossil I pulled out of a rock was in the Calvert Cliffs in Maryland. It was a Miocene dolphin vertebrae. And
Oh,
I just
cool.
couldn't believe, yeah, goodness. I couldn't believe that I was like the first human to touch that dolphin
Yeah.
vertebrae,
Yeah, those just like cool moments. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And looking back at it now, like having many fossil finds under my belt, it was not an exceptional find by any means. It was
Well,
like,
sometimes it's those little things, right? The fossil wasn't extraordinary, perhaps, now that you've got all this experience, but the moment was important to you and
yeah,
and was the most important maybe fossil moment in your life, and even though the fossil itself wasn't remarkable.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And even though it wasn't remarkable, our professors still, put it in the classroom on display, and I
made
felt
you
like,
made you feel good about it, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Some positive affirmation. So you graduate from Lafayette, and then where did life take you after that?
Yeah, totally. And one thing I will say is before I graduated, I had two really kind of transformational experiences. One was studying abroad, and I always encourage folks to study abroad and broaden their horizons. My first time leaving the country was through my study abroad experience. I actually took a paleoanthropology field school in the Turkana Basin in Kenya. It was called the Turkana Basin Institute. And at the time, it was run by Richard and Neve Leakey, or some very famous paleoanthropologists. And I kind of arrived at this concept of going kind of to the cradle of humanity because it married my, like, you know, deep love for studying early humans, but then also geology at the same time. You know, it
Right.
was kind of that perfect merriment of those two concepts. And there we studied, you know, early human evolution, and we got to go to the site of the earliest hand axes ever found. And you know, we all of our professors that taught at this field school were renowned paleoanthropology professors or geologists that were involved in the paleoanthropology field in some way, shape, or form, whether they were dating the layers that we were pulling this just you know, tremendous material, outlining this story of how we all kind of came from Africa.
Right.
Yeah, I just had this you know, another kind of transformational experience that also just broadened my worldview. And you know, geology doesn't follow political boundaries, and
Yeah,
you know, even
it's the same everywhere, right?
Exactly. And the rocks that I was looking at in the Turkana Basin were from the same kind of rift valley that the Passaic Formation I grew up on as a splitting of
Yeah.
Pangea occurred. Was deposited, and it was the same depositional setting, but I was living in the current, you know, the current
Yeah.
sequence, which was just so fascinating.
Well, it
So
sounds like it was a transformative experience for you, just like, and just it shaped the rest of your life for the most part.
yep, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, I was really grateful for that experience. So I always tell folks, you know, if you have the opportunity to study abroad, take it. And look at more rocks because the best
Right. Yes.
geologists, like I
Yes. You
said.
got to get outside your
Yep.
backyard at some point, right? So
Yep.
that was a
Yep.
year, doing the study abroad was a year long thing. Is that right?
It was just a semester.
Okay.
Yeah.
Semester. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was actually in Kenya when I was interviewing for my next position that was kind of transformative and also international. At the time, the Chinese government was funding the building of the second Panama Canal,
Hmm.
which is a much bigger, wider, deeper canal that can transport more modern ships
Yeah. Bigger ships.
across the Isthmus of Panama. And in this process of digging the Panama Canal, I mean, they're literally going through, you know, layers that deposit and capture the Great American Biotic Interchange. And so the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute and the University of Florida had a grant to kind of conduct paleontological triage, collecting as much material from these areas that, you know, were being excavated as possible before they were destroyed. And so I actually interviewed for that position while I was in Kenya, and I didn't go straight from Kenya to Panama, but very quickly after getting home from Kenya, I got on a plane and went to Panama and worked on this internship with the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute.
Wow.
Yes, small team, kind of just collecting as much material as possible. And while I was out there, I was able to be, and this is kind of a rare opportunity for an undergraduate, but I was the first one to have the opportunity to describe a section of a new formation, the Alajuela Formation.
Yeah. That's
Um,
big
and
time.
and Exactly. And this is another one of those situations where, you know, going abroad, we don't necessarily understand the geology in some of these more remote areas all that well. And so, you know, there are opportunities to be kind of like early American geologists abroad. You know, we like to think about, you know, this time that, you know, John Wesley Powell was exploring the West
Yeah.
and describing these sections, you know, in the Grand Staircase, and you have those opportunities when you go to largely misunderstood or poorly
Unexplored. Yeah.
understood.
Yeah. You got to be
Yep.
the discoverer. You got to, it's hard to discover things. I mean, you can't discover anything, but some areas like the U.S. and other places in Europe, wherever, have been explored a lot. And so you
Yep.
have to go to some of these other locations where there hasn't been a lot of work done.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. And got to meet geologists, international geologists as well. We were working with students from the University of the Andes in Bogota, Colombia. and got to forge some wonderful friendships and connections with geologists that are learning about the same things that I'm learning about in school in a different country.
Wow.
And we all have the same basal language that we're working off of, and it really provided this beautiful connection, and got to brush up on my like elementary Spanish.
Right. Yeah. Practicing. Yeah. Your
Yep.
fluency.
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely. Yeah, so anyway, that was actually before I graduated, my summer before my senior year, and
Hmm.
coming back into senior year, I was jazzed. I was so jazzed.
Yeah, you had all
Um,
these great experiences under your belt. Then you were able to see, probably, I'm speaking for you, but make sure I'm right. All the stuff you learn in school feels disjointed. How is this like really applicable in the real world? What do you do with this? And then you got to experience how it all works and like why it's important.
Yep, absolutely. Exactly. And I just needed to know what my hook was into the next thing.
Right.
And I was coming back from my time, abroad, and some of my fellow students at the same time were coming back from experiences they had with the National Park Service through a program called GeoCore. And I heard about their experiences, doing geological interpretation at, Glacier National Park and chasing marmots up
Yeah.
up mountains, and I was like, goodness, I want to do that. And so I knew what I was working towards, and this program still exists, and I'll get into it in a little bit, but it really is. If any early career geologist, mid career geologist, I think there's a limit, age limit, 35 years old. Um, have an interest in working for the National Park Service. There's a program that started off. It's called GeoCore. It's now kind of transformed into something called Scientists in the Park.
Hmm.
But it provides these opportunities to put, these early career professionals. Oftentimes, these students have now graduated. They have a degree, but not much experience into national parks, and oftentimes they're working on specific research projects related to either the geoscientists, and it's even geosciences, and it's even been brought into wildlife biology and ecology and night skies research. But anyway, I was applying to a couple of positions with this program, GeoCore, which is now Scientists in the Park, and got an opportunity to do an internship at Grand Canyon National Park. And I had never been.
Right.
My only time out west was still Bighorn Basin, but I figured it was all the same, and it's not,
Right. Yeah. After the fact, you
and
realized, yeah.
Totally. And specifically, what my mentor Ben Tobin wanted me to focus on was sort of ice age paleontology as preserved in the caves of the park, which was just the most compelling project.
Right.
Here I am, studying animals, which again, the human connection lived alongside humans through the ice ages, as long as humans were on the continent, and preserved in this like very complicated karst system. Grand Canyon National Park actually preserves the largest land area of karst in the continental U.S. Of all national parks.
I didn't
And
know
so
that. That's
there are,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, there are, I mean, just in your little strat column behind you,
Yeah.
the Moab limestone, the Redwall limestone, the Kaibab, all have these intricate cave networks that, the caves are older than the canyon itself. In many cases, it's the canyon cutting process that exposes those openings.
Right.
And anyway, there are hundreds of caves in Grand Canyon National Park, and there are hundreds more that are undiscovered. My job, along with my mentor, who was at the time the hydrologist and cave resource specialist at the park, we just kind of tromped around Grand Canyon National Park looking for new caves and documenting the material that we found in there. At the time, this was kind of like early photogrammetry. And so we were developing techniques for doing photogrammetry in cave systems where it's dark. And so kind of experimenting with lighting in order to kind of create these 3D models. I'm leaving everything in situ because, as you know, these caves are just tremendous preservational environments. They have, consistent temperature, oftentimes no to little humidity, and you can get really kind of exceptional mummification and preservation of these materials. And there have been carbon dates made on some of the materials that have been found in caves in the Grand Canyon that are tens of thousands of years old. Yep, pretty exceptional. So anyway, in my time at the Grand Canyon, I also found myself working on a project that connected the paleontology to the archaeology. A researcher, Stephen Emsley, he's actually an ornithologist out of a university in the East, kind of postulated on this concept that there exists these middle to late archaic split twig figurine kind of like effigies that seem to be placed in association with an extinct, and it was extinct at the time of the manufacturing of these effigies, Harrington mountain goat, which went extinct about 11,000 years ago.
Which times the people a little bit, yeah.
Exactly. If this connection was intentional, this would be the earliest evidence of a human, deliberately placing archaeological material near in situ fossil deposits, which is really, really cool.
Right.
So Stephen kind of postulated at this concept, and I worked with him to figure out how I can gather more data to kind of test this hypothesis. And we utilized data from some lower resolution at the time. Now they have LiDAR flown throughout Grand Canyon, but we were using some low resolution DEMs to kind of understand difficulty of cave access and other materials. But the data that we collected really supported this concept that Stephen had postulated. So anyway, it was a really cool to kind of marry the inventory work that I was doing, making these three-dimensional models of these cave resources with this concept that humans have been connected with these resources by either directly living with some of these animals or having understood these animals in the context of the Grand Canyon.
Right.
Very
cool.
And I just, oh gosh, I love it. I fell in love with the National Park Service, but as my mom told me, just as every mom does, eventually, Robyn, you need to grow up and you need to make money.
So the fantasy was over. The internships, the low-paying stipend internships, where it's like, yeah.
Yep. And I will say my mom has supported me. The reason why I'm the way I am is because my mom let me kind of follow all of my pursuits, but she's also kind of my grounding soul. And eventually, told me, goodness, Robyn, this was a kind of like forever internship. It started off 4 months and they just kept extending me basically as long as I wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be there for sure. But yeah, eventually I needed to start paying student loans.
Yeah, the real world was knocking at the door.
Yep. So luckily I was in a great environment to learn about the kind of job application process for working in somewhere like the National Park Service. So they're all federal jobs that you get, whether you're a custodian or an astronaut, you need to apply through this system called USA Jobs. And it's actually usajobs.gov. And there you have to develop sort of a resume, which is different than a typical kind of one-page resume or even a CV. And apply to jobs. And it's kind of like, I always use the metaphor of fishing, especially when you're kind of an early career professional. You just apply to as many positions that you find remotely interesting as possible.
Right.
And eventually you'll get some hits. I got interviewed and offered a job to work on a nuclear submarine.
Oh,
I'm really
wow.
glad that yes. I'm really glad that young Robyn remembered that she really likes being outside, and that would not go well
Yeah.
for her.
Under the
Uh,
water in a confined space. Yeah.
yep.
That would not fit well for me either.
Yep, exactly. Although the concept was very intriguing,
Right.
enough that I got to, the end when they offered me the job, and I had to think about it a little bit
Right.
harder. But I eventually got offered a position moving back east, actually, closer to where I grew up, where I was offered a position with the Environmental Protection Agency as a remedial project manager. And remedial project managers with the US EPA work on managing the cleanup of hazardous waste sites, Superfund sites, brownfields, etc. And the base that I was going to be put on, my site was McGuire Air Force Base, Fort Dix, and Lakehurst Naval Air Station. And these are actually some facilities that I grew up on. They were located really close to my house, and I grew up going to air shows there. I was involved in this kind of like paramilitary organization, the Civil Air Patrol, and our headquarters for New Jersey was located on those bases. So this was just like a sign, like goodness.
Coming home. Yeah.
Yep, coming home. And I was going to be doing something very different than, kind of focusing on geology and doing research. It was more so, big project management. I was going to have the opportunity to utilize my geology and hydrology skills for sure, but I was being introduced to this concept of toxicology and risk assessments for communicating risk to those that are exposed to these Superfund sites. And also learning about chemicals that I had no idea existed, At the time, this was also kind of early perfluoroalkyl substance, PFAS, development. And we had some PFAS contamination issues on base. So anyway, it was an opportunity for me to learn about new things and also learn how to kind of manage big projects, which will become important later in my job here at Zion. But I spent about 2 years at the New York regional office with the EPA, working with the Air Force in figuring out ways to clean up these Superfund sites on this military base. And I had, like I said, an opportunity to learn new things and meet new people, work on project management skills. And I was also deployed to St. Croix after Hurricane Irma and Maria hit the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And I got to learn about kind of the incident command structure and how to kind of organize hazardous waste cleanup after these large-scale environmental disasters, working with multiple agencies, and just kind of fell in love with emergency response at that time. But at the same time, I knew that this job that I took wasn't my forever job. I loved it. I really did. But really what I was seeing was kind of the worst of humanity. And I wanted to go,
Right.
wanted to go back to these pristine parks where we preserve unimpaired these beautiful spaces for everybody to enjoy in perpetuity. And so I was kind of soft looking for what my next move was after about 2 years. And Vince Santucci, he's the paleontologist for the National Park Service. He works in a division called Geologic Resources Division, which houses some of our subject matter experts that work across multiple parks. He sent me the geologist or the physical scientist position at Zion, and I had kind of seen it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would be the dream, but surely there's somebody more qualified than me.
You didn't think you were qualified. You thought, yeah, yeah. But you
Yep,
never know,
exactly.
and you always probably undersell yourself and underestimate your abilities, and yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Us women especially do that. But like at this point, I was still very much so early career, and I just also didn't really know, who I was going to be kind of competing against. So I kind of brushed it off until Vince really encouraged me to apply, and I was like, okay, if Vince thinks that there's even a chance,
Right.
I'll go for it. And I got it, and this is, an example too that I tell folks where, I think it was a lot of luck, but I really think that, you really do have to shoot for the stars.
Yeah.
I hate to
Well,
use
and you
such a
have to be
cliche.
aggressive and persistent
Yeah,
and go for it. And luckily, you had someone like Vince that saw in you what you maybe didn't see in yourself as much. And I mean, that's a great lesson for sure.
yep, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really grateful for those mentors too. My mentors in college, my professors, but then also my National Park Service mentors that helped kind of move me along through the process,
Right.
and understand this concept too, that like, I've been bouncing around in different disciplines, in different areas in the world, and in every single one of these instances I've been changed by it, and to not be afraid of that change. You experience a new thing and you might find that you love it, and really be hooked. Like there's a chance that I fell in love with hazardous waste and
Right.
stayed with the EPA, and spent the rest of my life, figuring out ways to clean up these
Yeah.
disasters. That's certainly a possibility. It didn't happen, but I still learned so much in
Yeah.
the
Well, and
process,
it's
and I
good to,
was changed by it.
yeah, and it's good for us to figure out, and I tell students this all the time, it's good to figure out what you don't want to do. It's good to take a class or have an experience like you did, a job experience where you're like, I did the job, I learned a lot of things, but this isn't what I want to do long term. I want to try something different. And that's good. It's good to know what you don't want to do.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, yeah. So, yeah, goodness. Fast forward to 2018 when I moved out west with my now husband, and we moved to Utah, and I took this job with the National Park Service, as the physical science program manager at Zion National Park, and I have had so much fun along the way. And now I'm going to show you
Yeah,
some
share with us what you do, and yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do at the park there. That'd be great. I love your enthusiasm,
totally.
Robyn. Like it's just, I could just listen to you tell stories all day because you're just so much energy. It's great.
That's really kind of you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, again, I'm really lucky, and really just very grateful, for for these opportunities that I've been given. But anyway, this is Zion National Park. This is Zion Canyon. For those of you who haven't been, it's in a really unique geological setting. It's in the Grand Staircase sequence, and actually preserves a significant chunk of time in the Mesozoic. So the age of the dinosaurs, younger than some of the material that I was working at in the Grand Canyon, in the rocks. But anyway, it's also in the headwaters of the Virgin River system, which is a tributary to the Colorado River. And because it's in the headwaters of the system, it has this really complicated hydrologic network. And then this geologic formation that you see here on the canyon walls is the Navajo sandstone, which is a really porous aquifer, holds a lot of water, and we have a lot of springs that discharge out of that Navajo aquifer. And so, as the river cuts through that aquifer, it's also gaining water into the river, and we've got springs discharging out of every nook and cranny and fracture and joint, in Zion Canyon. And so it just creates this beautiful ecological system that is dependent upon the geology that bounds it. So anyway, it's a really a beautiful place to be a scientist, and I work with some amazing people here at Zion National Park. But now I'm going to show you where Zion National Park is, for those that don't know. So it's located in Southwest Utah. I don't know if you can see that
Yep.
little
Yep. I can see it.
yeah, star that just popped up. And Every National Park Service unit is different in how it is kind of organized, but they all are kind of organized very, I wouldn't say militaristically, but similar to the way the military is
It's a government
organized.
organization, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it actually does have roots in the military. The National Park Service does. Many veterans ended up kind of founding early National Park Service, and so that relic is kind of still seen in the way the parks are run today. But anyway, every park has a park superintendent, and this is the big head honcho, and he or she kind of provides the general kind of vision for the park. And then there's distinct divisions under the superintendent. Oftentimes there's like a visitor and resource protection division, which has our law enforcement, fire and aviation. Oftentimes they run the fee booths. And then we have interpretation and visitor services, which is also a really fun place to go into. All of these positions are really fun, but interpretation rangers oftentimes work with the public and share the really cool science that is being done in national parks to the broader public, and just kind of help educate the public. And then also coordinate the army of volunteers that we have that are behind the scenes helping National Park Service run. So we have volunteers that are out there today tracking California condors, watching their every movement to see where they're going. We've got volunteers that manage campgrounds in the park. We have volunteers that rove trails and make sure visitors are safe, and if there is an emergency that they can get quick assistance. So anyway, we've got volunteers that kind of in every nook and cranny that keep the National Park Service running. Then we have these maintenance divisions, which have, oftentimes they're very skilled tradesmen that keep our trails clear and rebuild trails after they maybe get impacted by a significant rockfall event, for example, and our roads. We have engineers that work in our buildings and infrastructure and do kind of large scale infrastructure project management. And then oftentimes there is a division of the scientists. And the name of this division can be different across parks, but ours is called Resource Management and Research. And here we have wildlife biologists, vegetation specialists, botanists, archaeologists within our cultural resources program and our museum, physical science. We have a GIS kind of data management program, and then we have an office that makes sure that everything that we're doing is compliant with the law. We call them environmental compliance specialists. Right. Yep. And anyway, while this park sort of organization is set up kind of top down, there is so much communication that occurs between these divisions. Some of the folks that I work with most closely are in the maintenance division, our park irrigators and plumbers. The folks that run our trails and our roads programs are some of my closest colleagues, and I learn so much from every single day.
Yeah.
We work with our law enforcement specialists on a regular basis, and we're constantly in communication with our interpretation and education division to share what we're learning, so that way they can share it with the broader public. So anyway, here, let me see if I can. Oh, I've got some photos for you.
Hey, yeah, there they are in action. Yeah.
Yep, totally. This seal picture is iconic. Obviously not from Zion National Park.
I was gonna say.
But anyway, that's an example of a job that you can have in the National Park Service, is to hug seals.
Right.
It's pretty incredible. But as the physical scientist at Zion National Park, I pretty much work with all resources that aren't alive or put there by somebody that was alive, but sometimes are alive. So,
right. It's a gray area. Yeah, gray area.
Exactly. I do a lot of things, and this kind of hits on this concept that that have just been like a lifelong goal of mine is to be a lifelong learner. And so every day I'm learning a new thing. So
Oh, for sure.
anyway, goodness. One of the big things that I work on is managing the hydrologic resources of the park. And what this means in a very real sense is monitoring water quality and water quantity in the park, and as it relates to sort of our legal authorities. So I do a lot of work with water rights.
Yep.
You guys, folks that are joining from the West, probably know that we have more demand for water than we have water available, and so oftentimes I'm kind of the first level individual who is tracking where potential development may have an impact on hydrologic resources in the park. Do a lot with water quality. Most recently, regarding water quality and things that are alive, we have benthic experiencing benthic harmful algae growth in the Virgin River system. We discovered this in 2020 after a really tragic, really violent dog death that occurred in the park after ingesting pieces of the algal mat. And we've learned quite a bit about benthic harmful algae in the system as a result of some really intense monitoring we've been working on. But anyway, work with water quality. I'll get into the geohazards specifically. I've got some videos and slides to show on that. But anyway, do a lot with geohazards. We're very much so geologically active park. We've got flash floods in the rivers and tributaries to the river, rockfalls, landslides that occur very frequently. We have a lot of significant paleontological resources in the park, kind of documenting this age of dinosaurs. We have preserved the end Triassic mass extinction in the Moenavi Formation, working up with a researcher who was describing some of the things that she's been learning about our paleoclimate in a section in the canyon. Do some work with kind of climate monitoring. Another example of something that is alive that I work with too is that I also manage the native fish program. This has been a really fun learning experience for me because, as you've probably gathered, I am not a fisheries biologist by any means. I'm a geologist and anthropologist by training. And so this has been really fun to kind of learn about the native fish in the park and how we can better manage our fisheries and fish habitat for that resource. Some work with air quality, night skies. Zion National Park is a certified international dark sky park, right, due to its exceptional dark skies, but also commitments that the park has made to kind of eliminate or reduce light trespass and light pollution. And then I also help our environmental compliance specialists make sure that, what we are doing in the national park with park projects or research permits follow environmental law. We have the Wild and Scenic River Act is actually a significant environmental piece of legislation that dictates what we can do and what we can't do in Zion Canyon, because the Virgin River is a wild and scenic river, right. Which is really kind of an exceptional designation, especially in the West, where rivers have been so largely modified for our kind of human purposes. And then one of my other favorite things that I get to do is provide training and guidance to some of our interp rangers, to our volunteers, to the bus drivers that drive the bus in the park. And sometimes when kids come to the park, big groups of kids, school groups, I get to talk to them too. So I always love that. Goodness.
Very cool.
Yeah. Do you want me to get into Rockfalls, or do you have a...
No, this is good. Just roll through this stuff. I like looking at this is good.
Oh, heck yeah. I will say I'm not sure what's next in all these slides. Actually, maybe what I should do is
we can just be surprised or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, totally. I'm gonna switch over to a different PowerPoint that has actually the videos that I wanted to show everybody that are like really fun. So this is a presentation that I gave at Bryce Canyon Geology Festival, where I met your student.
Yes.
Yeah. So at Zion National Park, we have significant geohazard issues, rock falls, landslides, flash floods that occur frequently. Sometimes they happen on blue sky days. Sometimes they're triggered by precipitation events. But oftentimes they are not a problem. They occur in remote backcountry areas where they, are just a part of the natural canyon forming process. But sometimes they do occur where people and things are in their way, and in some cases, rock falls occur above buildings, sometimes they occur above trails, and sometimes they occur above roadways. And so this is actually a rock fall that occurred. It happened before I came on in 2015. My predecessor worked on this project, Dave Sharrow, but it's one of my favorite videos of us blowing things up, and so I'm going to share it with you. But a rock fall occurred. This is about 10 meters high, for some context. In the Springdale Sandstone member of the Kanta Formation, which is a cliff-forming layer in the park. And we've got, sort of this like very soft clay layer in the Moenabe below that's differentially eroding below
undercutting
these.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. And you can see this rock is fractured. And so anyway, we had this large rock fall event that occurred. And one of the things that we look for after a rock fall event is, have we kind of returned to this like baseline rockfall hazard for this site? Or because of the initial rockfall, are there some other concerning elements, whether that's kind of like a precariously positioned rock still up on the slope that looks like it's going to come down that we need to scale, or if the initial rockfall either caused or exposed some jointing that may be a toppling hazard as well. And so after the initial rock fall, this particular like almost 10-meter tall pillar, it's actually two, you can see there's a little lens of clay in between, was extremely concerning for the park. And this is located just above the Zion Mount Carmel Highway before you're going up the switchbacks, right
before you go
tunnel.
into the tunnels.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And so anyway, we've got tools in our tool belt to really kind of target removing certain blocks. And in this case, we used charges behind the block that we kind of pushed into that joint behind to literally push the block out and to break it up at the same time. So I'm going to play the video, and if I'm really quiet, maybe you'll be able to hear the audio coming through my computer.
Whoa.
Did you hear it?
No, but it's still impressive.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that you think so. So let me
insert loud noise here, right? Kaboom.
Yes. Yeah, it is pretty cool. So now we're getting to the end of the video after the dust clears. You can see that block has now disappeared.
Wow.
It really was a really effective targeting strategy for removing that particular hazard. We've used explosives. We've also just used water and something we called hydroscaling. So here, let me make this bigger for you guys. So here we are using a water cannon or monitor from our fire truck to actually
dislodge those rocks.
Yeah, exactly. You can see, I'm going to pan a little bit higher so you'll see our big rock of concern, but we had a rock fall occur. This is actually up the switchbacks where we've got quite a bit of unconsolidated material that's kind of just supported with this like soil sand matrix, that when we kind of get like exposure of the slope without any vegetation holding anything together, we have some significant rock falls that are mobilized just above the road surface. Okay. So we had a rock fall occur earlier that day. You can see that down here below, and we looked up on the slope and we were like, oh goodness, Because that rock came down, this rock that was just above it looks like it's teetering on the edge of disaster.
Right.
And so here we're using water to actually erode below the rock, accelerating that natural geologic process. And so here, let me show you him. This is our lead law enforcement ranger, Daniel, who's squirting below the rock. I'm going to fast forward it a little bit for you. He's going to hit the sweet spot here in a minute. Here we go. We're going to see it come down.
Boom. Wow.
Yep. Pretty incredible. I wish you could hear the audio there too.
Yeah.
To protect the road surface, whenever we do this type of kind of like targeted scaling, we always bring in a layer of sand, which absorbs some of the energy upon impact. And
right.
so, as you can see, it's not me out there pushing rocks down these slopes. This is a team effort. We've got our maintenance folks out there clearing these roads, dropping sand, kind of managing the scene. We've got our law enforcement and firefighters that are bringing.
Yeah, it's a team effort for sure. That's great.
Yep, absolutely, and it makes working in any national parks fun because you're not just working in some silo. You really get to engage with many others.
Right.
And then here, let me just show you this one last video. So this was a big rockfall that occurred. It actually hit the news. Here, let me make it a little bit bigger. This was one of our biggest ones that hit the news because it closed a trail complex, the East Rim Trail, that brought folks from the bottom of the canyon all the way up to. Here, let me turn the audio off since you can't hear it. Since I think they do say some naughty words. But anyway. Yeah, so anyway, it was a very large flake that came down from the top of Cable Mountain. Goodness, I forget the exact dimensions of it, but I want to say it was about 200 feet tall.
Wow. So one big large rock that free fell to the slope.
Because of the amount of material that came down and kind of like the fluid properties of the debris flow that ensued, it's actually characterized as a small rock avalanche. After the dust settled, which took about 2 days, it looked like a hurricane had blasted through this area. There were no trees left on the vegetation. In fact, no leaves left on the vegetation. In some of the trees were like quite literally severed from just the air blast that, at this point, the Navajo sandstone, which is like kind of a really poorly cemented rock, broke into, cobble-sized blocks and sand and silt. And so anyway, it was a pretty incredible geologic event. We are so lucky in that the East Rim Trail was actually closed this day due to another rockfall that had occurred earlier that year that we were planning on doing some scaling on. And so nobody was up there on the switchbacks except for one deer that we had a radio transmitting caller on that their signal went totally blank after this event. So we suspect one day we're gonna find this deer and its collar kind of eroding out of the slope. But there were a couple of minor injuries that occurred below. There was a shuttle stop and a small trail, the Weeping Rock Trail. But we have been closely monitoring. Oh, here I've got dimensions of it now on this next slide. So this was about 12,000 cubic meters of material, which equates to about 31,000 tons. It's this large flake, roughly the height of the Statue of Liberty. Pretty incredible. And we've been utilizing some remote sensing techniques like photogrammetry that we've been gathering images via drone to do some 3D modeling of the site. We've been learning quite a bit about rockfall frequency and magnitude of the site because of these repeat photogrammetry surveys. I'm seeing material that has come down from the scar. We had another large event occur last November from this source area, indicating it's a progressive rockfall, but then also rockfalls occurring around this Cable Mountain cliff face. And all of these data go into a risk assessment that we use to derive what the risk is to to visitors, but also to employees that would need to be up on the slope, restoring this trail. So I see that we're kind of nearing the end of our time. So I'm gonna
Yeah, skip through whatever you need to.
oh yeah. Sorry, I actually realized I turned the volume off. Okay,
Oh, you're good.
now I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, skip through and give us the highlights, I suppose. Just you with whatever you got
Yeah,
there. I know there's a
totally.
lot of great slides there, it looks like.
Yep, totally. So what I'll do is I'll give you a quick highlight on this other geohazard project we're working on, and then I really want to talk about fish.
Okay.
So if you've got a little bit more time,
Yeah, let's do it.
okay, heck yeah. So this particular complex we've been looking at very closely and evaluating and developing risk assessments on to make some decisions on how we're going to ultimately manage this site. But we have another rockfall hazard area that's actually above historic housing complex. We call this the Pine Creek Housing Area. It's a pre-CCC complex that used to be the main center of all Zion National Park activities. Our visitor center used to be there, and our maintenance yard used to be at this housing complex, and some of these houses were our historic superintendent's quarters in the park. And anyway, just really important cultural resource in addition to a functional resource providing employee housing.
Right.
And we identified in the last couple of years a 20-meter tall pillar above one of these homes. And here you can see a cross section of this pillar from the right. This is actually a composite image. And goodness, we took one look at this pillar and we were like, goodness, this is a scary looking piece of
Ticking time bomb,
Springdale.
yeah.
Yep, exactly. And clearly we weren't the first to look at this pillar and be concerned, because we hiked up there and we found that somebody in the last 100 years since these housing units were built had poured a cement base below this pillar, presumably to kind of prevent that differential erosion that we were talking about, of the Moanavi kind of scouring out below the base, creating that toppling hazard. We also hiked up above the pillar and looked down the crack between the pillar disjointed from the main cliff face, and found these concrete blocks that we're presuming were poured to almost like glue this pillar to the cliff face. And this elicited a lot of questions from us, because as you can see from these blocks, this block is attached. This is the cliff face, and here's the pillar, and you see that there's space right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that means that pillar is moving.
Right.
It's moving out
since they poured the concrete. Yeah.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we have no real good records of them doing this, so we can't really figure out how much time has lapsed. But it began to kind of like elicit a number of questions from us, which is, what kind of movement are we looking at this pillar, which is clearly kind of ratcheting out over time? And then if there is that permanent movement, as we suspect, just looking at these concrete blocks, what is the angle that this pillar is sitting at? So that way, if we do see linear movement occurring, we might be able to estimate when this thing will finally fail from a non-seismically induced event. So anyway, just a number of questions that we began to think about. And so we worked with the Geologic Resources Division. At the time, Dr. Eric Bilderbach and Jack Wood were there helping to kind of resolve this question of ours. Jack and Eric also worked with Greg at Yosemite, just for those who remember Greg's interview. But anyway, they helped design a system of these crack propagation meters that we installed attached to the pillar and then attached to the cliff face. So you can see in this photo, this is Eric, and then this is a scientist in the park, intern Henry, just after they had rappelled down through this crack to install, if you see this very faint gray line, a crack meter that is attached to the pillar and then the cliff face, and then this is one that we installed at the top. and you can see very well
The housing, yeah.
the hazard below, the vulnerability below, I should say,
So the
which is that
quick
housing
question,
area.
Robyn, is the crack meter measuring expansion of the crack? And if so, do you have telemetry so it's like real time, or do you have to go out and measure it each time?
You got it. Yeah. So we have some systems across National Park Service units that don't have those capabilities, either cell phone service or Wi-Fi or telemetry. And so rangers have to go and download the data. But fortunately, we are just on the edge of where our cell phone signal covers in Zion
Mm.
Canyon. And so we have at the top of this pillar a tripod that houses the data logger, but then also a cell phone modem, which transmits the data real time.
Oh, perfect.
And one of the benefits of this particular system is not, just us learning really cool about the thermal elasticity of the Springdale sandstone and understanding, its movement over time, but it also can act as an early warning system if certain velocity thresholds are triggered. We actually get texts real time to let us know that there's some movement that's kind of eliciting us to look at the data a little bit closer. But let me just really quickly, this is a kind of a crazy data set to quickly dump on you. But this black line is our upper crack meter, and the red line is our lower crack meter, and this yellow line is our control, which we have just located on the cliff face itself. And you can see that the control is moving over time, but it's returning every single year to its same exact position. And
Mm-hmm.
that's to be expected, but it's what we compare the crack meters on the pillar against to show that this crack meter actually is expanding over time. For a number of years, about 3 years, we had linear movement of about a millimeter per year. And that elicited kind of our next question, which is, again, what is the pillar geometry? So if we do see, that crack propagation of about a millimeter per year, maybe what we can do is we can estimate the date of final failure. And so we had a student researcher from Utah Tech University, our local university, a geology student, Kieran Condi, and her mentor, Dr. Alex Tai, bring in a remote sensing consortium, UNAVCO, to develop a three-dimensional model of this pillar using some really high-resolution terrestrial LiDAR units. And they gave Kieran this point cloud, which she used to generate a mesh and derive its center of mass and center of gravity. And then she used another program to kind of test different hypotheses for failure. And she determined that the pillar is actually oriented inward towards the slope.
Hmm.
And so every year it's ratcheting out. This crack is getting bigger and bigger. The pillar is actually getting more stable, whereas eventually it will start to then kind of ratchet outwards and become less stable. But at least in our kind of like human existence, next 100, 500 years, this pillar appears to be ratcheting into a more stable position over time.
Yeah, interesting.
There, yeah, totally. So this is her null result of the pillar's current kind of like orientation. If it was unsupported, it would fall inward towards the cliff face. And then her outward result, which required, I think, about 3 meters of permanent propagation, which is fairly significant on a
Right.
1 millimeter per year timescale. This is that final failure result. So anyway, we've really enjoyed working with Kieran and Dr. Alex Tai with this data set to kind of answer these next questions that we've had. Yeah. So anyway, that's geohazards. I don't know if we've got a second
No,
to talk about fish.
yeah, give us a couple minutes on fish. I want to
Okay,
hear why
okay.
you're so jazzed about the fish.
Oh my gosh, totally. So yeah, this is going back to this concept of me not being a fisheries biologist, but really kind of falling in love with the native fish here in Zion National Park when I discovered that I was actually in charge of them. So anyway, here again is the Virgin River system. This is one of our native fish that we have in the system. We've got 4 native fish. Two of them are species of suckers. This is a flannel mouse sucker that exists widely throughout the Colorado system, but is listed as a sensitive species under the state of Utah because of diminishing habitat and predation of non-native species, etc. And then this is one of our other fish, a minnow species. It's called the virgin spine dace, and it's endemic to the Virgin River system. It's found nowhere else in the world but the Virgin River. And Zion National Park preserves kind of exceptional habitat for all of these native fish species, but especially for the virgin spine dace. Every year we go out and we monitor fish health and reproduction throughout the system, and we found that we have a fairly healthy system. It's a really fun event. We set up these big block nets, and we use these backpack electroshockers to actually stun the fish that we then scoop up and we put into these buckets, and they're kind of asleep in this process, unharmed, but they eventually wake up, and we take measurements on them, and we get a good species identification so we can understand, that annual recruitment to ensure we've got a healthy population. But unfortunately, even though we have a fairly wild system, we still do have relics of some of this early pioneer water management that was necessary at the time for growing crops in the arid desert landscape. And so the way folks were able to make homesteads of this harsh landscape was to divert the water from the river into fields that they grew produce and had their cattle graze on. And these dams are preclusive of upstream fish movement. And fish need to move freely throughout the systems. That way they can capitalize on different habitat during various life stages, during their early kind of larval and young stages. They need to be able to access these low flow tributaries especially during high flow events. And then also too, they need to be able to connect with different populations to enhance the genetic diversity. And so anyway, we have a series of these low head dams through Zion Canyon in Zion National Park. A lot of visitors don't even notice them. Some visitors think that they're natural features, but anyway, they're preclusive of upstream fish movement. And this is a map of the 4 dams, and you can see that they occur in kind of like rapid succession of each other. And we received funding with the bipartisan infrastructure law through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then funding through some National Park Service fund sources to actually remove 3 of these 4 dams. And I'll show you a photo of one of the dams. This is the Crawford Diversion Dam. This is another kind of relic diversion dam that was enhanced from its early kind of pioneer days as being an earthen dam, and it's now a very large concrete dam. And even this like 1 meter drop you see below next to the sluice is preclusive of that upstream fish movement.
Can you make that one bigger?
Oh, yeah.
You're good. Sorry, it's just small.
Totally.
So that's a concrete dam. Okay.
You got it. Yep. So this is another one of the dams. This is the Flanagan Diversion Dam. This is our biggest dam, the Birch Canyon Waterline. This actually isn't a diversion dam. This is a waterline dam. Back in the olden times when we had initially put this waterline in, which conveyed water from some springs on the west side of the canyon to a large water storage tank on the east side of the canyon. We just laid the pipe across the river, and then we just dumped concrete on top of it. Over time, below the dam, it begins to scour and undercut, and oftentimes the resolution is to just dump more concrete. And we have many layers of concrete that have since formed this this barrier to upstream fish movement. And so this is one of the dams that is slated for removal in the process. That fourth dam, the one that isn't going to be removed, this is the Flanagan Diversion Dam. What we're going to be doing is installing a rocky ramp downstream of it, to allow for upstream fish movement, but maintaining the dam crest where it is. And it's important here for this diversion dam because this diversion dam actually diverts water for the town of Springdale and Rockfall for culinary water supplies for that town, as well as some irrigation water for the park. So anyway, it's important to maintain that water infrastructure, but also figure out ways to make it work best for our natural ecological system. So anyway, here's our dam. But anyway, I'm very excited about this project because it was hard for me as a non-fisheries biologist to figure out what I can do to help these fish. And so I kind of thought back into my time at the EPA doing restoration work, and I was like, goodness, I think there's some restoration projects that we can work on,
right,
to make this this ecosystem, reduce our footprint on this ecosystem and manage this better.
right.
And so anyway, I kind of developed this project at the perfect time, right as the federal government was releasing these large swaths of funds for these big infrastructure projects that have kind of a resiliency component to them. And so I was able to kind of capitalize on that opportunity and receive funding to actually implement the project. And so the first dam we're going to be removing is occurring this winter.
Oh, cool. That'll be exciting. Yeah, and just like you're just restoring the river gradient a little bit so the fish can like move through that ecosystem. That's awesome. Yeah, and it's, you know, like you said, it is a fish issue. So the wildlife biology is at the forefront, but it still draws upon, you know, fluvial geomorphology, chemistry, like there's all these other factors. So it's sounds like a fun multidisciplinary project. So
absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
And you get to be in charge of it. How fun.
Yeah. It's been another great opportunity to learn new things about how project management works in the National Park Service and contracting and
all the red tape and stuff. Well, cool. Well, let me as we wind down, I have maybe like one or two just little kind of Zion questions for you that are like broader and not kind of project based. But thanks first of all for taking time and sharing your passion, your obvious passion for what you do and the things you're working on was really apparent and super fun. But maybe what's like what's the number one thing you wish visitors to the park knew about the park? Like if Robyn could impart one thing to them all, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I wish that visitors could understand that this whole landscape on a geologic time is just falling apart in front of them.
Right.
You know, I wish, and maybe we could create a movie or something to demonstrate this, but the rate of erosion is so significant. We're losing about 1,200 feet of material every million years.
Wow.
And the canyon retreat process is about 10 miles every million years, which means that Springdale a million years ago looked like the start of the Narrows. So I wish what we could do is like create some movie to just show how the whole thing is falling apart,
right.
and then you as a visitor are coming in, you're seeing it just one little blip in time, you know, but you're really just seeing that one tiny little blip and the whole canyon is falling apart. And what a gift that we get to see, you know, canyon forming processes in such a geologically active canyon. So anyway, that's what I wish visitors would understand.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, yeah, it's a dynamic landscape, and you've got the faulting and the uplift, but I didn't know some of those numbers you just gave us there. That's pretty crazy how quickly
it's incredible.
Yeah, and we're just in this little moment in time. So
yep.
Well, cool. Well, Robyn, I know you have other things to get to, and so I just want to thank you again so much for taking time today and sharing a little bit about your background, how you arrived here. I think people watching this will be inspired by your passion for what you do, and who knows, you might inspire, you know, that next generation or someone else. So, yeah. Anything else? Any parting thoughts or anything?
Well, goodness, that last sentiment you said is like such a gift because I am just so grateful for the folks that have kind of shaped me and guided me along the process. And I also just want to thank you and the service that you are completing for the general public, people that are just generally interested in geology, but then also those early career geologists. I can't tell you enough how impactful my professors were on my career. So thank you for what you're doing for our young geologists.
Oh, you're welcome. It's fun, and I think we're all in the same mindset of just, it takes a village, and you take when people are giving to you when you're early in your career, and now we're both at a point where now we're giving back and we're helping others. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
super fun to share. So, well, thanks so much, Robyn. We appreciate your time, and gosh, hopefully I'll be able to maybe see you sometime when I'm down in southwestern Utah. So,
Yeah, let me know. Hit me up.
okay, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye, Shawn.
Okay, take care. Bye.